Hello and welcome. Welcome back to Unfiltered with Bob Z. And today we have a very special guest. He is Delegate Don Scott of the 80th District, representing our beloved sister city, Portsmouth. And so he's here, and we're going to have what I've always promised is an unfiltered conversation. So we try to give it to you that way, and the show is called Unfiltered. So we're going to just jump right in, and my first question is, Delegate Scott, you have a very interesting story. I heard it before, but I think your life journey is just, is just really something that I guess people have a different perspective of the so-called American dream, but I just think that we have dreams in general, and and that we want to aspire to, and heights that we want to reach to. So I'm not going to tell it, but how has your life's journey influenced you as a delegate?
Thank you for having me. First of all, this is great to be here. I'm gonna try to stay unfiltered. Some of my story need to be filtered though. But I'm one of the things that I've learned in my journey in life is you need people.
Right.
You need people to have your back. That's why you and I get along so well.
Indeed.
Because we know how to support one another, and we know how to check each other.
Right.
And you always need people like that on your team. My life's journey is a little different. I'm originally from Houston, 3rd Ward. Grew up single mom, 6 kids. But we also had that country influence. We would go back and forth to a little town called Jasper, Texas. You may know Jasper. That's where Robert Byrd was put on the back of the truck.
That's where I remember that name from. That's where I remember that name.
So I have that's part of my perspective. Race is always a very powerful, overbearing, sometimes burden in America that we don't like to talk about.
Right.
So a lot of my influences and things that have happened to me, I can't deny that race played some role, but I also can't deny the fact that a lot of whites, and Latinos, and others have helped me as well.
Right.
My journey, get straight to the point. I mean, I went to prison before. After I graduated from college and was in law school and left law school, graduated and went straight to prison on a drug charge. And we can talk about the justice and injustice of that or not, but it was a 10-year sentence. I did 7 years and some change in federal prison, and got lucky enough to come out and meet a great woman, have good family support, and the society tries to tell people that you're done.
Right.
And I never thought I would be done. Even growing up as a kid, and a lot of people won't believe this, but I knew I was going to go to jail one day, even though I was doing everything right at the time.
Wow.
I just thought that's one of the rites of passage.
Wow.
That you go through. You have to deal with law enforcement at some point, and either you're going to go to jail or you may get lucky enough just to maybe get abused and not go to jail, but something's going to happen, and so how do you bounce back? So I'd always been prepared to do that. Got out of there and worked at a corporation for several years, maybe from 02 to 15. Decided to take the Virginia bar. I graduated from law school in 94, never practiced. I passed the Texas bar and went to jail. So I never got to practice. I got sworn in. I've only taken 2 bar exams in my life. I took one in 94 and one in 2014, 20 years apart, and passed them both the first time. I'm proud of that, but I'm also know that it takes work and discipline. It's not so much intelligence. And a lot of times we tell our people that you have to be smart. And what I tell people is that you have to be committed. Commitment beats brains. There's a lot of smart people out here, but they weren't committed to it, so they don't get it done. So one of the things that I think you have to do is do that. And then you got to get good people on your team. So how all that's influenced me being a delegate is that I advocate for what they call the least of these.
Amen.
Some of these people always talk about, their Christian values and what they believe, and I just can't see it. So my whole thing is, I want to see your values walking. How do you help people? How do you work with people?
Right.
And one of the things as being a delegate, and which has made me want to run, is that I think I had a contribution to give in my experience. And just so, one of these folks say, look at God. One of those things is, I was already talking criminal justice reform prior to me running because of my life's experience.
See?
And now everything that's culminated put me in the right place at the right time. So now my message resonates. So the same bills that were being voted down last session are now coming back up to be voted on and being asked for. They're asking for me to bring those bills back and asking to partner with me on these bills around police accountability, around criminal justice reform, around giving people earned time credit if they earn it while they're there to do. Either we believe in rehabilitation or we don't.
Right.
You can't have it both ways. So now I have people who want to work with me on those things, and that's informed my life's experiences. And I'm an attorney, so obviously
Right,
I get
yeah.
get blessing, and I get to see that, and I see it from a different perspective. I see all aspects of the criminal justice system and the civil justice system. So.
And so that's
how it's
coming
going.
up next week, or when
We go back in the special session August 18th.
August 18th. Okay.
And
All right.
we have some limited bills. We're dealing with the COVID-19 issues around budget, and we'll also be dealing with criminal justice reform, police accountability.
Right. Oh, my God.
I was already into that stuff before it became sexy. You know what I mean? So I'm glad to see everybody coming on. I don't mind you letting me push it uphill and you jump on and ride down with us, and that's okay. That's because that's what we need right now.
I can really relate to what you're saying. When we talk, I think we talked. I think it's similar spirits. Where we can just recognize, because I always tell people I spent my entire adolescence trying not to become a felon. And so people will say, well, if you do things for the community, they'll say, well, you're a great guy and all that. I'm like, I don't know if all that's true about being a great guy. But what I do know is that I feel like I owe. I feel like I owe. So that's my motivation. And while, I didn't fall prey, I didn't, go to prison, but,
Not yet.
I had, well.
Knock on wood. No, I'm joking.
I'm man, after this air, I don't know. It's unfiltered. But no, but I did fall prey to other things. I had, issues like everybody else had,
Right.
issues with drugs, different things. So,
Right.
But I still feel like the things you do is like, has your way of paying your debt to society.
That's right.
Not traditionally, people say they
That's
think
right.
a debt to society
That's
is going inside, but you have a debt to society.
If you're conscious.
If you're conscious, and and so I try to push that narrative because, that's, when you say that's what I believe. So when you say look at God, I could be looking at Don Scott or looking at the wonderful things and the fruit that's produced in an individual. And so right now you say you're going back in a special session. Mm-hmm. How do you feel, particularly as a delegate? This is another delegate question.
That's fine.
We can talk on all levels, but how do you feel the Commonwealth has responded to the COVID-19 crisis?
Unfortunately, we have a president of these United States that basically said, I'm not going to be held responsible for this. I don't want to be accountable. And I don't think any intelligent person would blame the president for COVID-19 happening.
Right.
Nobody would do that. That would be ignorant. But I think any intelligent person would have to hold him accountable for the response that we've had to COVID-19. So the fact that there's been no federal national response for this thing that we're calling a war. When we have wars, we mobilize.
Right. Yeah, we do.
All hands on deck, and we come up with a national solution, and we hadn't done that. So,
Yeah.
but I think that the Commonwealth, and I have to give the governor some credit. Thank God, I think he's the only medical doctor that's governor of a state. So because of that, I think he has responded the best way possible moving forward. It's never perfect because you have so many competing interests. There are people in the business community who are being impacted. There are people in development and real estate that's being impacted. There are the essential workers now that we know are essential, that we've always knew were essential, but we took them for granted, that are being impacted. There are families being hurt by this. So I think the Commonwealth, I think, has done a good response. I think the national response has been abysmal.
And I must certainly agree with you with that. One of the things I wanted to touch on, and it's kind of it's unfiltered, but over the last 3 years, and I'm just, I've been watching state politics all my life, state, national, local. That's just a hobby for me. So I know that, like, with the current climate, and in the last 3 years, I'm thinking, like, wow, we have decriminalization of marijuana. We've had so many things go our way in the Commonwealth, and I'm like, I don't know if it has something to do with the alleged, photos of the governor, or whatever, but I do know that the things that we've gotten done in the Commonwealth, that we have long time, we've been seeking a lot of different things that have happened, and I'm like, wow, And so my question is, how do you view, I guess, just given the history of this is the bedrock of the Confederacy. This was the bedrock. Inequality. How do you feel like that we're addressing the inequality issue?
I think we still have a long ways to go. I mean, the fact that you would believe that we've done so much, which we have, that just tells you how bad it was.
How far back we were. Yeah.
And we still have a long ways to go. Virginia, 1619. They invented this thing, and so
yeah.
And Virginia, Richmond was the cradle of the Confederacy, the capital of the Confederacy.
We number one.
Virginia has a unique history in the racial story of America, and so it should be Virginia that leads us out of that past. Virginia should be setting a standard and example of what true equality looks for and looks like. So I think we have an opportunity. Matter of fact, I think we have a responsibility to lead the nation the same way they led us into this mess. They should be leading us out of this mess, and that's the way I look at Virginia as an opportunity.
I never thought of it that way. That's very, very sensible. That if you were the first to do this, then you should be the first in, first out.
You broke it, you fix it.
Yes, that's right. Since I think we touched on some issues with incarceration, and I just want to know what you think about is there a direct correlation with systematic racism, and we know it is, but I want you kind of to expound on it with the increases size of the prison population.
Well, I think you either have to. There are two notions in mind. Either you have to buy into that all black people are criminal, and therefore we should be incarcerated at a high level because we're more likely to be criminals, which is why we're 19% of Virginia's population. But we're 55% of Virginia's Department of Corrections population.
Wow.
So you have to ask yourself, either are we really a people that are made up, born day one to be criminals? Or are we products of this environment, and are we over-policed, and is the system rigged against us from day one? So by the time we get in the game, it's already rigged. So you either have to buy into the notion of white supremacy, which would justify 19% of the population making up 55% of the Department of Corrections, or you have to accept the notion. I would suggest you have to accept the notion that this is a systemic racist system from cradle to death.
Wow.
That gets us in this system more often than not. Now, why would I say this? Within a mile of where we are now, there are children who literally will grow up. By the time they won't get the first choice of where they go to school or where they live until they're 18, 19 years old. Everything that they do right now is dictated by their zip code, where they were born, what education they will get, what teachers they will get, whether the students they will sit next to. All of that is dictated by the nature of the color of their skin and the condition of their birth socioeconomic status. So you have to ask yourself, how did we get here? And if you do a deep dive, you don't have to do a deep dive, do a mini dive, skim the surface.
Okay.
You'll have to say that it's based on the fact that the racist policies that got us here. We got to understand that when World War II and World War I were fought, and they came back with the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe,
Right.
they didn't rebuild Black America. When they came up and said you would get the GI Bill and the VA loan and all that stuff, that was denied to those black veterans.
Indeed.
So that was a middle class subsidized program for white America to grow and prosper that we were not beneficiaries of, and that's how we get to where we are now. So,
And it's created generational wealth for them as well.
generational wealth and generational misery and poverty for us.
Exactly.
And that leads to, there are studies around poverty and incarceration rates that go hand in hand. You would be surprised to know, look it up. Don't believe me, don't take my word.
All
There's a
right.
Pew Research study that shows that the top 10 zip codes for incarceration rate, top 10 zip codes that they do them all across the country. But 3 of the top 10 zip codes in the country are in the state of Virginia. 3.
I grew up in one.
Norfolk has one.
23504.
Portsmouth's number 2 or 3.
Is it?
Portsmouth has 23701, which is number 1 or 2 in the country. Look, Portsmouth, Virginia.
Right.
For
right.
zip codes by incarceration rate.
Right.
Norfolk is in the top 10, and Richmond has a zip code in the top 10.
Right.
And Virginia probably in the top 30 has about 6 or 7. We are a state that is based on making sure that we keep our foot on the neck of those who are already down.
Right. And not only that, it's a thing called hotspots. And when I was working as a re-entry specialist, there's a thing called hotspots. And Norfolk, Portsmouth, and Richmond, the same cities that you named, they have the highest, they call them hotspots because they're where when people are released from prison, that's where they live at. That's where they go after they've been incarcerated. And there's one right on the corner, right back here. It's one right on the corner, and of course Portsmouth and Richmond. So, and it's just incredible. But recently, I noticed that several, like 11 Commonwealth attorneys, banded together and formed an organization. And I look and say, wow, this is different. And so they founded an organization that was, I think, was put together to ensure due process and, to
I
check
think
out.
they call it I'm not sure the name. I think they call themselves Progressive Commonwealth Attorneys
Progressive,
Organization,
yeah.
something like that. And I think Norfolk and Portsmouth, my city,
They did.
Mrs. Morales is a member,
Uh-huh.
and I think
And Mr. Underwood.
and Mr. Underwood, and I think there are several. I think the data that they had said they represent either 60%
It was
or 40%.
42%
of all of Virginia's population by city.
42%, yeah.
So they represent a lot of the urban communities, and so I think it's good that they are responding to the will of their communities, and that they are looking at criminal justice from the top to the bottom in a different perspective, and that's what we need. We need people in those positions of authority and power to recognize that there may be a better way than to try to incarcerate ourselves out of some of the problems. Back in the 80s and early 90s when you and I were youngsters,
I remember.
and it was the crack epidemic.
Oh, man.
And they didn't hesitate to criminalize black bodies immediately and then build this mass incarceration system. But now when it's heroin and opioids and prescription drugs and the users are mostly white folk,
Right.
now it's a health crisis.
It's
We
a
knew it was a health crisis then.
terrible health crisis.
But
then.
now we are doing the right thing. So I don't begrudge them for coming around. I know why they came around, and we can't be naive about that. But I think now is an opportunity for all of us to benefit from the new perspective around this is a healthcare issue, this is a disparity issue, this is a depression issue, this is a suicide issue around the drugs. So I'm happy to see that the Commonwealth attorneys who have signed on are changing their perspective, or are being able to take the leadership to enforce the perspective they already had when they ran. Some of them already believed that they needed to make change, and I'm glad to see that they're galvanizing around those voices.
Right. Defund the police. Now, that was a phrase that it didn't really mean to defund the police from my perspective. It meant to reallocate funds that could be used in other areas of crime prevention. And from, I guess the question is, when we talk about community policing, I guess that's another one of the initiatives when, it's certain in what we call the Great Awakening, I guess, since the tragedy of George Floyd, I guess there's been a great awakening, and not only just in this country, but, worldwide, it's like, they was like, oh, America, look, what you doing? What you doing, America? And for, that was, I thought it was great. But what do you think that, with those initiatives, and what are your take on how resources should be? Should they be reallocated, or what do you feel about that?
First of all, I will say this. I think you're right about people saw the death and murder of George Floyd happening so callously and so indifferent and so in a way that you knew that you had done this so many times, there was no way you're going to be held accountable because you've gotten away with it so many times. Nobody would hold you accountable, even with witnesses yelling. So I think the rest of the world responded and saw that and resonated, not just talking about, oh, America, look at you. They were sending a message to their own leaders, where they are, those who are being devalued and marginalized, said we can identify with this type of thing with those in power who don't acknowledge our humanity.
Right.
And that's what that was about. But defund the police is a phrase that I don't use because I know that, where I live, there are people who call the police and need the police to show up and respond. But they need police officers to show up and respond who are guardians of the community, who are protectors of the community, and not see themselves as hunters in the community. They need people who live in the community who have the same cares and concerns of the community. If you see in yesterday's paper in Norfolk, only 25% of your officers live here. In my city in Portsmouth, the chief of police doesn't even live in the city. Only a small percentage of the citizens.
How is that possible?
Don't get me started. And many of the police officers there don't live, let alone Virginia. Most of them, they don't even live in Virginia. They live in a lot of them live in North Carolina. So we have a disconnect between the people that are supposed to be serving protect and serve, or serve and protect, the way I like to say it, and those who live in those communities. So if you don't know and you're not going to the grocery store and you're not going to church and you're not going to places with these folks, how do you know them? Only time you see them is when you're responding to something, and not on their worst day if it's a crime or some tragedy. Right. So you get to start judging all of the citizenry with the same thing, because even the best trained person, if you see the same thing all the time, you're going to start detaching. You're emotionally detaching and dehumanizing the people you have to deal with every day. So I think we need to do more around getting a diverse force and doing some things. And one of the things I wanted to talk about as we move forward in the legislature is barriers. Brothers were young, had a misdemeanor or something else, and time has passed, and he knows the community and working in the community. Why can't he be a law enforcement person?
Right, exactly.
We need to look at some of this stuff, because some of these people I see doing law enforcement, they should never have gotten a badge. They don't have the disposition, they don't have the temperament, they don't have the love for people to be a police officer. They shouldn't be one.
One of the things that I've been pushing, because it just seems like it is either two excuses that when things go left, or when things go awry, or there's an unarmed black man killed or unarmed black person killed, it's two things that they'll say. The first thing is going to be, that's how I was trained. Then the second thing was I was in fear for my life. Those are always the two excuses that are used. And so what I like to see is, and then it's always that they're not minorities on the police force. And so what I like to see is they're trained wrong, if you ask me. And I tell them, I say, if you're being trained by the same person who did the same thing 20 years before you, that had the same practices, and now he's training you, you're trained wrong. And if you're looking at for minorities, you have 4 HBCUs around here that graduate every May and every December, bachelor's degree students in criminal justice. Every 6 months is a graduating class. If you're looking for people who are, they know the Constitution, things that you are taught. I teach criminal justice, so I know that there are things that on the undergraduate level. So I think if they had a better educated force, if they really wanted to get minority candidates, that would be, a proving ground. So, I'm looking at that, but, with their training, I just feel like they should do a better job of training and so what do you think about that?
I think the training is good. They probably need more de-escalation. They do a lot. But I believe in crisis, what's in you will come out.
Okay.
I don't care how much training you've had.
True that.
If you're predisposed to and biased against black folk, and you get the opportunity, or you're afraid of black people,
right,
and you get the opportunity, or you dare somebody black challenge you, and he's running away with a taser that he took from you, and you shoot him in the back as a young man was in Georgia.
That was pivotal.
I mean, that is part of the mindset, and no amount of training is going to prevent that is within you from coming out in crisis. And so I think that's an excuse. And I think we need to do a better job of recruiting officers. I mean, I don't know anybody, and I guarantee you most boys, maybe a lot of girls, but most boys, when they see the police growing up when they was kids, they wanted to be a police officer.
Oh, no, not us. We ran.
When you were a little kid. I mean, when you were a very
With
little
fire
kid,
trucks and
you
police
saw the
cars,
fire
yeah,
truck and
yeah.
the police car,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
saw the sirens, and you wanted that thing. You say, I'm gonna be that. I want to be a police officer. I want to be a firefighter. That looks fun. But as you get older and you see the misuse and the abuse of power, you're like, no way. You know, I tell people all the time, some of my colleagues who didn't come from our communities and don't understand, I say, y'all grew up when something went wrong, y'all would say, oh, thank God somebody called the police. In my community, it would be, oh, hell, who called the police? It's like no matter how bad it was, you didn't call the police. And so I think, you know, that we need to rekindle and get a love for community and police officers back in our community but that love has to be reciprocal. You know what I mean? If we can do that, we can build a better community and have more cooperation in our communities when crimes do occur and when we need help and more intervention ahead of time. But as long as we have police right now, to me, because they're being criticized, they don't get criticized well. They don't take criticism well. So the first thing they do is they have a siege mentality. It's us against them. Right. So now we start having these Blue Lives Matter and all this kind of stuff because we said we were hurt. Now you got to act like you the victim.
We're not going to answer the call.
And so, are we going to take strikes? Or we taking out like they did in Atlanta?
Flu.
Yeah, they got the blue flu and all that. So at the end of the day, we got to get out of that grievance. You don't see anybody walking around when a doctor gets sued. You don't see nothing like doctors' lives matter. When a doctor gets sued, when a lawyer gets sued, you don't have lawyers' lives matter. They don't lose. They're the only profession that when something happens, we started this new movement. I mean, I bet you, you look at some data, I think more taxi cab drivers get killed per year, Uber drivers. You know what I mean?
I should drive Uber.
So there you go.
Wow.
So, you know, that they get hurt and assaulted. And you know, that's a dangerous job. But this is the job they signed up for. So, you know, there are guys right now standing watching the military somewhere in a foreign land, and they not whining. So do your job. Everybody do your job, but don't do the job.
You know, one of the things that I thought about, and I want to get your take on this, is workforce housing. And I know that's probably on the city level, and you know you're on the state level, but you know you're a wise man. So, well, I think so. So, workforce housing would include, you know, when they're talking redevelopment. Let's just talk about in Norfolk. Let's say Place Huntersville. They have 400 vacant lots, and so my concept was that, you know, why not have teachers, firefighters, police, so, you know, people that teach at Norfolk State, people that teach at ODU, you know, where if you're trying to really change a neighborhood, if you're really trying to redevelop a neighborhood, what we're missing is middle class, I think. I think particularly in this area, you have like working class and more underserved communities, and then you have more affluent. But it's not a real strong middle class. But the concept is that if teachers lived in the communities, because none of, you know, it's a great disparity of teachers that teach in Norfolk and Portsmouth that actually live in the city. And like you were just saying, the police officers as well, if you lived in Norfolk, then you would be patrolling your streets. Or if you lived in Portsmouth, you would be patrolling. They would be your streets and not just in theory. So what's your concept?
I mean, I agree. I think we need to create some tax incentives for teachers and other and law enforcement and first responders to have some reasons to entice them, incentivize them coming in those communities. And I think there's some ways we can do that. So we really need to be creative about that. And the same thing with you know, if I see, you know, teachers and police to me have a lot in common. And there's a lot of demographics in common. They all work for government, but they got these special unions and they get special services. No offense to any teachers. I love teachers. But they got the same racial demographics. We become more diverse. 80% of the teachers in America are white.
I did not know that.
And so, we start seeing why the message. Who's teaching these people that grow up to feel like they can put their knee on somebody's neck?
Wow.
Where are the values coming from in the classroom that values everybody? How's that being affirmed? And because we have a problem with teachers. We have a problem there. We have a problem with connecting with parents. So if you take a look at that's why I talk about systemic structural racism.
Right.
And people become so immune to it. You didn't even know that number about teachers.
I had no idea.
That's who's teaching our children every day. And so you wonder why your child might have a self-esteem problem. It's because that teacher might only be calling on them when they don't know the answer. You know what I mean? So there are things you can do to destroy someone's self-esteem and promote someone else's to a child that they don't even realize you're doing. By the time they get through, they never know that teacher messed them up long back. So we need more diversity in classrooms. We need curriculum to be looked at. We got to stop teaching that, that Robert E. Lee was a hero and was fighting for his country and only went to serve his state. That is their version of history.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we need to start telling our version. If they don't want it to be the truth, if they don't want to say that's the truth, okay, fine. Let's tell our version, because y'all been telling y'all version long enough, and that's what got us in this mess. So that's my take on workforce housing and the people who get the benefit from those tax incentives that you're discussing.
Right. Well, okay, that was certainly unfiltered. Keeping in line with, but I do have a question. This pandemic has, I think it's kind of hit some of the tax base, as far as the local and state governments, it's kind of put a strain. So my next question is that the legalization of marijuana, do you feel like that's going to come up soon, and would that help ease the pain of some of this that was been caused by a pandemic in relationship to, as far as the coffers of the state budget, or will that even play a factor, or is it just a social issue?
I think all of that is a great question. I am definitely for the decriminalization, which we did last time. I think we have some more work to do, because at one point there was an argument, I'll say a debate happening whether we should go full legalization back last session, or go decriminalization. I was on the decriminalization side, and the reason I'm on the decriminalization side is I don't want to go full legalization until there's an apparatus in place whereby the people who've been punished traditionally can now participate in this stuff being legal and make some money. So if I was selling it illegally, and I'm good at selling it, now you're going to let me out, but you're going to say that if I have a felony, I can't sell it. Well, my felony is for possession with intent to distribute marijuana. I'm good at that. So now you're going to tell me that the skill set that I have, I can't do it because I got this, because I sold it illegally.
Yeah, who are you going to ask?
So why not let me sell it legally now? You know what I mean?
Right, I get
That's
it.
like telling the bar owner during Prohibition that now liquor's legal, but you can't sell the bootleg you've been selling. So at the end of the day, I think, that's why I was against it, because we need to have the apparatus in place.
Okay, that makes
so
sense.
We have equity. And I'm like, look, if ain't no black people going to get rich when marijuana becomes legal, I'm against legalizing. I'm just telling y'all that right now.
Well, that makes sense.
I'd keep it decriminalized, but I don't want to have our money, our community be the first consumers.
Right.
You know what I mean? We need to participate in production, growth, marketing, distribution, the whole nine. And when we put that in place, I'm all for legalization.
Well, you've heard it right here. Unfiltered with Bob Z and Delegate Don Scott of the 80th District in Portsmouth. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you later.